Graders, just wanted to start going through our packet again. As many of you guys are working through these packets, you're working really hard, and I am so proud of you. This is going to be a quick review of week 5. I'm going to do all of week 5 for the math section. I wanted to remind you that at the top here, you are going to be able, I'm just going to highlight it really quick, you are always able to see what module and what lesson we are on. So you can see at the top of your packet, it'll say Module 5. So all of this work is Module 5, which is about fractions. And the lessons that are associated with it are sometimes not going to be in order, or they're going to skip a few lessons because they are trying to pull out what they think is most important. I do want to encourage you all that if you are able to go on to Zearn. Zearn is one of the best things you can work through that is online. It's the exact lessons that I would be teaching you in person. And so as you go through Zearn, you would be on Module 5. And some of you guys are already through Lesson 7, but when you get to Lesson 7, for example, you would see the same lesson, but online. However, a lot of you are maybe not able to access Zearn, so this is a good review for you to go through. For your daily fluency, you want to practice multiplying and dividing by 7. Now, when you are asked to divide, just ask yourself, for example, so 14 divided by 7, you would say, okay, 7 times what gives me 14? Remember, division is just the opposite of multiplication. It's taking the total and dividing it by one of the parts. Okay, so our new learning today is just figuring out more about fractions. So this is asking you to whisper the fraction of the shape that is shaded, then to match the shape to the amount that is not shaded. So I can count the total number of parts to find the fractional units. So we see it's fourths and sixths. Then I can whisper what part is shaded. So we see it's 1/6 and 1/4. Then I can count how many parts aren't shaded and draw lines to match. So we see the parts that are not shaded, or the parts that are white, are 3/4 and 5/6. Okay. The next part of our new little lesson here of day 1 of week 5, it says that Mom lights 10 birthday candles on the cake. Alexis blows out 9 candles. What fraction of the birthday candles are still lit? Draw and explain. So if we were to shade 9 out of 10, how many parts are still lit? And it would be 1/10 of the candles are still lit. Okay, so now it's asking you to try it on your own. You have to think about what fraction of the shape is shaded, then match the shape to the amount that is not shaded. So number 1, we see that it's 1/4 is shaded. What is left over? It's 3/4. Okay. Number 2, we see that this is talking about tenths. So I see 1/10 is shaded. So what is no longer shaded? It would be 9/10. You guys got this. Okay. Then it goes down to this part where it's asking you for each strip to represent one whole. It's one whole piece of a candy bar. Write a fraction to label the shaded and unshaded parts. So for example, part A, we know that there are 5 equal parts. The unshaded part is 4/5. What would the shaded part be? It would be 1/5. Okay, and you're going to label the rest of your fraction strips. Then, right here, it's asking you to continue to build on what you've just been learning. It's asking you to write the fraction that is not shaded. It is so important that you guys read directions because many of you guys might want to say that this is 1/8, but it's not 1/8. And this is actually wrong. I don't know if they caught this, but I did not type these up. But actually, it looks like these are two separate questions. I'm so sorry. This is great that I'm looking through this with you guys. So number 1 and then number 2 are totally different, and I can see where that would be very confusing. So number 1 is looking at this figure. Number 2 is going to ask you to do something underneath. So number 1, write the fraction that is not shaded, and you can write it anywhere that is on the side here. And so what you guys could write, for example, is you would say, okay, I know that there is 1/8 shaded. How many are no longer shaded? We would know that 7/8 are not shaded. That would be your answer. You just write it on the side there. Okay, then for number 2, it asks you, there are blank 6 in one hole. How many 6 are in one hole? There would be 6 in one hole. Now that looks really funny. Let's see if we can go back. There we go. There are 6 sixths in one hole. Okay. Number 3 asks you, the fraction strip is one hole. Write fractions, label the shaded and unshaded parts. So once again, you're just labeling your fraction strip here. We can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 equal parts. So how many are not shaded? 3/4 are not shaded, and 1/4 is shaded. Number 4 is a word problem. Now, word problems tend to be really intimidating, but you guys can totally do it. Read it carefully. It's asking you to figure out what part of his lawn is mowed. So Justin mows part of his lawn, then his lawnmower runs out of gas. He has not mowed 9/10 of the lawn. What part of his lawn is mowed? Think about it. You guys can do it. Okay, now going to day 2 of week 5, you can see now that they are on lesson 8. Here, the daily fluency is to be able to identify the shaded parts of the whole. You can see for number 1, they wrote 1/2. What would be number 2? It would be 1/3. This is great practice for identifying fractions. Our new learning is to be able to show a number bond representing what is shaded and unshaded in the figure. Draw a different model that would be represented by the same number bond. So you can see that they took this figure, they counted how many pieces they have total. Then they figured out how many pieces they have shaded and how many pieces they have not shaded. Our whole is going to be represented as one whole. So it says, I can draw a number bond that shows one whole broken into 2 parts. One part shows how much of the whole is shaded, which is 4/9. You know that because there's 1, 2, 3, 4 shaded boxes. The other part shows how much of the whole is unshaded. You know that by counting the unshaded boxes, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5/9. Together, 4/9 and 5/9 make one whole. I need you guys to really be careful when you do these things because I've noticed that sometimes people like to write, for example, for the shaded part, they might write 1/4, and that's not correct. You need to make sure your denominator or the bottom number is the total amount of pieces you have. Okay. Same with this activity right here. It's asking that I can draw the shape to show one whole with 4/9 shaded and 5/9 unshaded. It can also be represented using the same number bond And lots of other models could work too. So here's one example. So we could use a fraction strip. Now, it's asking you guys to continue to write some number bonds. I really need you guys to be reading all of these word bubbles because it will completely help you understand what is going on. A lot of it is just breaking apart what is shaded and what is not shaded and correctly labeling the fraction. So now they're going to ask you to try it. It says to show a number bond representing what is shaded and unshaded in each of the figures. Draw a different visual model that could be represented by the same number bond. And what I mean by that is you can draw a square, you can draw a circle that shows equal parts. So for your sample, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 total parts. That's going to be represented by one whole. Then you have to ask yourself, how many are shaded? There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 eighths are shaded. That is one part. The other part to make up a whole is the unshaded part, which would be 3 eighths. So that is answering our shaded and unshaded. Shaded is 5 eighths. Unshaded is 3 eighths. Put them together equals one whole figure. You can also represent it over here. And what they chose to do is they chose to shade in 3 out of the 8 and keep the 5 eighths unshaded this time. Notice the difference. When you are all working on your worksheets, make sure you're practicing breaking them apart with the number bonds. The top number should always be 1 because it is one whole figure. Break apart one part of the number bond as being a fraction of the shaded, and then the other part of the number bond as being a fraction of the unshaded. For example, if I were to complete number 1 right here, I have 5 equal parts. 3/5 are shaded, 2/5 are unshaded. That would be your one whole number bond. All right. When you get to number 3, you are going to draw a number bond with 2 parts, showing the shaded and unshaded fractions of the figure. Then you're going to decompose both parts of the number bond into unit fractions. So what it's asking you to do is to fill in the missing numbers. When you get to your problem set, you are going to draw a number bond that shows the shaded and unshaded parts of the shape below. Then show each part decomposed into unit fractions. What I really just want to see you guys do is to draw a number bond that shows the shaded and unshaded parts. So one whole at the top. One part of your number bond would be the fraction that's shaded, which is 2/5. Another part of your number bond would be 3/5 because that's unshaded. Here it says to complete the number bond, draw a shape that has shaded and unshaded parts that match the completed number bond. So we know that the bottom number right here is 7ths. That means that the figure that they were using had 7 equal parts. I recommend shading in 2 of them, and then it'll give you the answer of what is left over to make up one whole shape. Okay? Now, it's asking you here is it feels like it's an intimidating word problem, but you guys can totally do it. Take it slow, take your time. Johnny made a square peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So it tells you the shape. It's a square. Okay? He ate 1/3 of it and left the rest on his plate. Draw a picture of Johnny's sandwich. Shade the part he left on his plate, and then draw a number bond that matches what you drew. What fraction of the sandwich did Johnny leave on his plate? So if you shade in 1/3 of his sandwich, how many thirds do you have left over? Make sure you draw a picture and draw a number bond. All right, now, ladies and gentlemen, we are on lesson 9 of module 5, and we are on day 3 of week 5. Now, it's asking you to use the digits 1 to 4 at most one time each, so you can only use it one time, to fill in the boxes to make the largest possible product. Multiply a 2-digit number by a 1-digit number. Now, this is really like outside thinking. So you have to use a number, a digits from 1 to 4, and you can only use them once in these boxes. This is something that you can try on your own. All right, there's no right or wrong answer per se. All right, if you wrote like 1, 1, and 1, that would be wrong because that's not following directions. But if you wrote 4, 3, and 2, that might be the correct answer, right? So try your best to think really hard about what's like a large number that you could make. And I know that a lot of you guys are going to do a great job at this. All right, now, this is where we're going to fill out another chart. It says that each shape represents one whole. Fill in the chart. So each of these holes is partitioned into halves. So the unit fraction must be 1/2. 3 halves are shaded. I can show this by writing 3 halves. So our unit fraction is 3 halves. How many units are shaded? 3. Fraction shaded is 3 halves. Now, estimate and draw the shade units on the fraction strip. So if I have 7/4, I write that as 7/4. So I need to draw 7/4. We know that 4/4 is 1 whole. So this is showing us that we have two holes, right? So what it's asking you to do is now we're taking what we know about breaking apart fractions, and now it's asking you to think about having more than just one whole. You might have 3 holes, you might have 4 holes, and you're breaking it all apart. If this is confusing for you, working through the worksheets, I recommend definitely working through this lesson on Zearn. It says that each figure represents one whole. So each figure represents one whole. That means in this sample problem right here, there are 1, 2, 3 holes. Fill in the chart. Sum has been completed for you. So what is our unit fraction? How many pieces are in each hole? There is only 1/2. They're each split into 2. So what is the number of units shaded? There are 5 total units shaded. So what's our fraction that's shaded? There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 halves. So if I were to count, there'd be 1/2, 2 halves, 3 halves, 4 halves, 5 halves. Okay, so right here we have 2 holes. They're both split up equally into 8ths. We know our unit fraction would be 1/8. A unit fraction is what represents just one part of one figure, so it's 1/8. So what is our total number of units shaded? You need to think about all of the numbers, all of these that are shaded, and then you're going to write it as a fraction. Okay, go ahead and try your best to complete this chart. You know you can do it. Now, here it's asking you to estimate and draw and shade units on the fraction strips. So our sample is showing us 5/3, which equals 5/3. So how many thirds do we need to shade in? We need to shade in 5 of them. But for each figure, what do we break it apart into? We break it apart into thirds. So we have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So each figure has thirds. How many total thirds are there? There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 total thirds for 2 figures. And you're shading in 5 of those thirds. So let's look at the number or letter A, 8/6. So if you look at that first rectangle, how many equal parts do you break it apart into? You break it apart into 6 equal parts. Now you have a second candy bar. What do you break that apart into? How many equal parts? You also have 6 equal parts. Both of the figures will be broken apart into 6. All right. So just to help us in what this might look like, let's see if if it'll allow me to mark it up. Okay, so I think that this should work. Let's see. I need to just move it over a little bit. Okay. 3, 4, 5, and then I have 1, 2, 3. Okay, so you can see my lines are not perfect. Just try your best. And you also need to recognize that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 equal parts. And then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 equal parts because we are talking about 6. What are 8 sixths? You would shade in 8 of those. Okay, that is what it's asking you to do. Now, what this is asking you to do is exactly like the chart a couple pages back. It's asking you that each shape represents one whole. Now fill in the chart. So how many shapes do I have total? I have 1, 2, 3, 4 shapes total. They're each split into thirds. So my unit fraction would be 1 third. How many total number of units are shaded? You count how many total are shaded. And then what is our fraction? What is our fraction of the shaded parts? Remember, your bottom number is going to be thirds. We're still talking about thirds. Okay. Number 2 is asking you to do once again what we did up above, which is breaking apart our rectangles. Please pay attention to what the unit is they're asking you. So for example, this says 4 thirds. That means for each of these figures, you are breaking it apart into thirds. Okay, so each of these squares should be thirds, and you need to make sure you are going to shade in 4 of them. Okay, now we are going to go through with 2 more days to go through. You guys are doing a great job. All right, so we are going to look at Module 5, Lesson 10 and 11. Now it says using the digits 1 to 9 at most 1 time each. That means you can only use the number 8 once. You can only use the number 9 once. Fill in the boxes to make the latest possible time. All right, so I want you to think about what is the latest possible time you can make that's PM. All right, that was just a fun practice. All right, and so with our new learning, we want to look at one. So again, we're looking at fractions. That's this whole unit is about fractions. It says each fraction strip is one whole. The fraction strips are equal in length. Color one fractional unit in each strip. Then answer the questions below. So we colored in each of them. We colored in 1/8 and 1/6. Now, you will then circle less than or greater than to complete the sentence. Okay, if they're equal in length, I want you to read this bubble because we're going from left to right. Is 1/8 less than or greater than 1/6? So it says the fraction strips are equal in length and they're lined up. I can compare by looking at the fractional units I colored and seeing which one is bigger. 1/8 is smaller than 1/6, so it's less. I could also write that 1/8 is less than 1/6 or 1/8 is less than 1/6. When I read it, I say 1/8 is less than 1/6. Then you are going to label the unit fraction in each blank. Draw and label the same whole with a shaded unit fraction that makes the sentence true. There might be more than one correct way to make the sentence true. So this is where you can make any other fraction that you know that would make the sentence true. So I want to remind you guys, we did this lesson as a class. You guys had great ideas of how to make things or fractions that were less than or greater than. Okay, so when it says I need to draw the same rectangle and partition it into equal parts that are greater than 1/3, make sure it's so important that you're using the same shape. So if you see that this shape was a square, you need to draw a square and then see a way that you could, whatever fraction could be less than. So 1/3 is less than 1/2. That is true. It's smaller. 1/3 is smaller or less than 1/2. You could also have said 1/2. Now, you can see that I already started completing this, and we actually went through this yesterday in our review session. So I'm not going to spend too much time going through this with you all, but if you have any more questions about comparing fractions, all right, we want to make sure that you understand this. Use fraction strips. Look online and work through those fraction strips on comparing. Draw pictures if you need to. But I do want to encourage you all to continue working through that. You then get an opportunity to fill in and draw pictures that would make the sentences true. So 1/3 is bigger than what? And you would need to draw a square and figure out what is 1/3 greater than? How is it bigger than? So think of a smaller fraction. And one example you could do is 1/4. So 1/3 is greater than 1/4. Okay, remember, as the number on the bottom gets bigger, it's actually becoming a smaller amount. You will continue comparing and making these statements true. So this is 1/7. 1/7 is less than, is smaller than what? Draw the same figure and then figure out what is it smaller than. Now, number 2 and number 3 on this page are just comparing fractions, and you are going to draw pictures to explain your answers. So for number 2 and 3, read them carefully. And they're going to ask who ate more or who used more. Make sure you really pay attention. Now, our very last lesson of week 5 is lesson 12. Once again, if you need more help working through some of this, I do highly recommend working through Zearn. If you are not able to access Zearn, as always, you can contact me and I can help you work through it a little more in depth. This is day 5 of week 5, and it's asking you to use the digits 1 to 9 at most one time each to fill in the boxes below to create the smallest possible difference. So you want to make sure you are going to subtract some numbers, and you get to create the numbers. And you want to see what is a small number that you could come up with as the answer. Now, what you guys are going to be doing here are drawing some shapes. It's asking you that the shape represents the given unit fraction. Estimate to draw a possible whole. Draw a number bond that matches. So, 1/5. The 5 in the fraction tells me that the unit is fifths. So there are 5 equal parts in the whole. Since this shape is a unit fraction, I can draw 5 copies of it to build my whole. There are lots of different shapes I could draw. So for example, now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 of them. So these are all, this is showing us fifths, right? It's important that there are no gaps or overlaps. Overlaps would mean that the parts aren't equal. If there were gaps, the whole might not be clear. We can also represent it by a number bond. We did a number bond in a couple lessons prior, but this is asking you to represent it with a bunch of different unit fractions. So I can draw a number bond that shows the part-whole relationship between the unit fraction and the whole. Remember, a whole is 1. How many fifths equal up 1? There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fifths. This matches the drawing because it shows that 5 copies of 1/5 make up a whole. So today, in day 5, you would do a lot of drawing. Now, number 2 is asking you that Kathy and Laura use this shape, it's like a diamond almost, to represent the unit fraction 1/4. They each used it to draw the holes below. James says they did it correctly. They both did it correctly. Do you agree with him? Explain your answer. So, who do you think doesn't have gaps or overlaps? If you said Laura, you are correct. So you can see Laura's shape does not have any gaps or overlaps. Kathy's shape, on the other hand, she overlapped a lot of her diamonds. So I can easily see in Laura's shape that she drew 4 copies of the shape to make a hole. You then need to explain that we don't agree with James. So here's where you're going to try drawing pictures to represent a possible hole. So the shape that they gave you here, you would just need to draw 7 of these shapes. Now, some of the shapes might be kind of tricky to draw, and I just want you to try your best. But you can see they drew 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of those shapes. So right here I have a square, and it's showing me that this is 1/9. How many copies of this do I need to draw now? I need to draw 9 squares. Okay. Now it's asking you right here to show me who did this correctly. This is a word problem. Read it and really explain your answer. This is one of those times when you get to use words to explain your answer. And then once again, the problem set. You are going to use the shapes that they have given you, estimate to draw a possible hole. So here is 1/2. This is only one part of the half. There should be two copies of this shape. So this shape is kind of tricky to draw. Just try your best to draw 2 copies of it, touching one another, not overlapping, and no gaps. The same with 1/6. Here is a square. So how many copies of the squares are you going to draw? You're going to draw 6 copies all together, and then that will give us, it will show us a correct representation of a hole. All right, so then you can see different ways that they have drawn these different figures. And you are going to, once again, draw a possible hole, label the unit fractions, and then draw a number bond that matches the drawing. I really want you guys to pay attention to number 5. This is a great sample. They showed us the picture of what it represented. This was 1/3. We knew that we needed to do 3 copies of it. So here's 1, 2, 3. They tried their best to draw it. So it shows us 1 hole. Then we drew a number bond, 1 hole, and then 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 gives us 3/3 or 1 hole. All right, so that is really what I wanted to focus on, and then you'd be done for week 5 with math. Continue working on these and continue working on Zearn and iReady. I'm super proud of all of you.